It was a role player battle royale as the shorthanded Heat and Sixers met Wednesday night before the All-Star break, and it was an evenly matched affair with 21 lead changes and no team holding a lead bigger than just 8 points. But it was Miami who came up big when the game was on the line and able to hold off Philly and hold on to a much-needed win. The Heat have won 6 of their last 8 and go into a much-needed break. Back on track, we'll break down the game and answer your questions on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com. Joining me as always is longtime NBA reporter David Ramil. However, you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Recording this on Wednesday night on Valentine's Day after the Heat beat the 76ers 109-104. They've won 6 of their last 8 games, including the last 2 on back-to-back nights against the Bucks and Sixers. They go into the All-Star break at 30-25. We're recording this during the fourth quarter of Indiana's game against Toronto. There's a chance that they can go into the All-Star break in 6th place in the East. We'll talk about the Heat climbing the East standings and hand out credit cookies in a bit. But, David, what stood out to you in this Heat win?
Not a whole heck of a lot. I think there were some great individual performances, but it was clearly not as dynamic performance as Miami had against the Milwaukee Bucks just yesterday. Nikola Jovic was not as impactful as he had been yesterday. Caleb Martin continues to kind of be a little inconsistent offensively, but they got some incredible performances from Duncan, Bam Adebayo, and Tyler Herro, who we'll talk a little bit more about in the next segment. And it was just this weird back and forth game where no team really was able to establish any kind of comfortable rhythm. And I think it's partly due to the fact that no superstar player was out there for either. Bam, I guess, is as close as you're going to get. Tyrese Maxey, obviously the one-time All-Star. He's on the other side too, although he did leave the game briefly. Without Miami's shot falling as consistently as it had yesterday too, Miami's offense just kind of slowed down a little bit. But I liked Miami's tenacity, the way that they stuck with it. They came up with some big plays, played some nice defense down to stretch, and were able to kind of extend the lead. Although that was even a little tenuous as the game started winding down. They cut it to 3 with what was a minute left or just under a minute left.
Yeah, and the Sixers scored 5 points in 9 seconds. There was like a Bam goal.
They were up 8 with a minute and a half left. Yeah, and it seemed like Miami was going to pull away, and then not so fast. Paul Reed, B-ball Paul, getting the and one basket opportunity, and cut the lead to 3. And if not for a timely Jaime Jaquez putback dunk on a missed Duncan Robinson three-pointer, Miami might not have won this game. But you know what? That's it. That's what Miami does. They come up, find a way to make big plays, and they did it when it mattered the most.
Beggars can't be choosers, right? No Jimmy Butler, no Terry Rozier, no Josh Richardson on the second night of a back-to-back on the road. I don't care how you get that W. As long as you get the W going into the All-Star break, I'm happy. The Heat should be happy. I'm surprised to hear you say that we didn't really get any dynamic performances, because I thought Tyler Herro was the star tonight.
That's fair.
And I thought Bam Adebayo was really aggressive. Yes. I loved what we saw from him as well. Like, we didn't get 2 back-to-back Jovic awesome games after a career night within a 48-hour span. And you know what? Don't paint me surprised. We got a great Nico game last night. I wasn't expecting him to score another 20 points tonight. It was definitely a quieter night for him. He only played 14 minutes in this game, but I'm okay with that. As long as you're sort of remaining big 3 of Bam, Tyler, and Duncan Robinson. All 3 of those guys, I'm sure, are going to get credit cookies when we get to that segment later on.
No doubt.
Like, they were awesome tonight. They did exactly what they had to do. This was a game where they were going up against a team that was probably dealing with bigger injury concerns than they were.
Yep.
When you consider that obviously Joel Embiid was out and they lost Tyrese Maxey for a key stretch in the second half. And then it wasn't an injury, but Kelly Oubre leaving early because of foul trouble in the game too. So they were down another core player for them, a high scorer for them. So no Tobias Harris, great point. Yeah, he was out. So, but again, it was the second night of back-to-back. This was never going to be a clean game, right?
Yeah.
It was never going to be that way. But Tyler and Bam and their 2-man game, with all of those things happening, they said, all right, let's simplify this as much as possible. Tyler Herro, Bam Adebayo, pick and roll. We're going to spam that over and over and over again. And I love that they did it. They simplified the game plan and it worked.
They had they didn't have consistent greatness throughout the game, but they each had stretches where they were very, very good. I would say Tyler maybe a little bit better than Bam. Bam started off the game really energized, aggressive, and I thought he was going to completely dominate the matchup. I honestly thought maybe we might see a flirting with 30, maybe even 40-point outing for
I agree
him
with you.
because he was able
Yeah.
to take over against Paul Reed, the size mismatch. And then he kind of tapered off a little bit. It wasn't really as aggressive looking for a shot. But to your point, then in the third quarter, when Miami was down, I think, and they came into the Sixers came into out of the half really, really on fire, and they were able to extend their lead to 7 points. Then Bam kind of picked it up. And even before that, he had tried to be aggressive, missed a couple opportunities early in the third quarter. So it just wasn't consistent greatness. But you're right. They each had great performances, just not consistently over this course of the game. But really nice games from each of them, and Duncan Robinson too, who started off, was it 5 of 5, I think, and then started missing his shots late down the stretch. That 1 3-pointer that might have been able to seal the game for Miami. Instead, it caroms off the rim right into Jaime Jaquez's hands, who was wide open on that. So it was amazing that he was able to get so clear and finish off with that dunk. But I would say it was an ugly game, a tightly contested one.
Sure.
Again, no team really able to pull off, pull away from the other. Whenever Miami had a lead, the Sixers would come back, and vice versa. They're just trading blows. Just two guys just kind of punching at each other, and kind of more like not like a really heavyweight bout, more like two fat backyard kind of brawlers, just kind of punching at each other and just kind of getting tired and being like, all right, you're gonna throw a punch, am I gonna throw a punch? That kind of thing, back and forth. It was a good win. A Miami Heat win. I bet you Eric Spoelstra was happy as hell.
Yeah, 21 lead changes in this game. Miami's biggest lead was 8 points. Philadelphia's biggest lead was 7 points. So, like you said, just going back and forth. Miami didn't pull away there until the very end. Like I said, their biggest lead of the game was with like 2 minutes left before Philadelphia sort of cut it back with the 5 points in 9 seconds, and then it was a little there. And then, like you mentioned, the Jaime Jaquez putback that basically sealed the win for the Heat there. It was an ugly game, but that's okay with me. Weirdly, Miami scored 116 points per 100 possessions in this game, which is about 3 points per 100 possessions more than they have scored on average all season. So as ugly as it was actually an above average offensive output for the Heat. I like the shot selection overall. They got to the rim a lot more. 32 shots at the rim. 32 of their, let me get the total here, 88 shots in the game.
Yeah.
So that's a much bigger percentage than what they usually shoot. 39% of their shots at the basket. They made 75% of those shots at the rim. And that was a trend. That was something that happened against Milwaukee on Tuesday night. The rim a lot more. We talked about Milwaukee's kind of Swiss cheese defense in that game being part of the reason for that. But, with Jimmy Butler out, and Jimmy likes to kind of get those mid-range looks and stuff like that. Going back to my original point, the simplification of the offense, pick and roll, pick and roll, pick and roll. Philadelphia got beat on a number. I don't know that they knew what they were doing defensively tonight very much. I think Paul Reed was very productive offensively, but defensively,
he's a little lost.
Mess. And he kept like doubling Tyler Herro on those Tyler Bam pick and rolls when he shouldn't have been, leaving Bam with open runways and stuff. But credit to Miami, like they kept going to it over and over again. They found the mismatch. And I'm with you. I kind of thought it was going to be a big Bam night. Started off strong, kind of tapered off kind of in the middle, and then finished strong at the end of the game too. And so I thought he was exactly what Miami needed. I thought Tyler was great. And Duncan Robinson didn't miss a shot basically until the fourth quarter, I think it was. So big performances from them. We're going to hand out credit cookies here in the next segment. And then coming up later on in the show, we'll talk about what it looks like for the Heat climbing up the Eastern Conference standings. Can they get first round advantage? Home court advantage in the first round in the playoffs. Are they working towards something like that? All of that coming up here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood Confidential. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on a 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA and a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees do apply. Add now for some legal info. Claim as of the first quarter of 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. David, that channel is taking off for our network right now. Just put it on YouTube. Everybody's got smart TVs now. Throw it on your TV while you're working from home. All these from home workers, throw it on. You catch up on all the sports, in-depth local coverage like you can't get anywhere else, but you put it on there and you get everything you need to know and then some. If you're a real sports fan, that's the way to go. All right, we're going to talk about Miami's standing position in the Eastern Conference, whether or not they could still get home court advantage in the first round, plus some buyout options that the Heat might be able to explore during the All-Star break. But it's another Heat win, which means it's time for the tastiest segment of Locked On Heat. It is time to hand out some credit cookies. And it's Valentine's Day, so I think we can hand out some special Valentine's Day themed cookies. David, what do you got for us? What kind of cookies are we handing out today?
You know, my son is still a pre-K, and Valentine's Day is a huge deal for the under 6 set. Let me tell you, they are so psyched up for this, like the major holiday, because everybody gets candy. He came home with a stash that pales in comparison. Like Halloween was nothing in comparison to what he got today. Like unbelievable. Everybody brings in like a little goodie bag.
Those little heart-shaped chalk things. I love those when I was a kid.
Heart-shaped chocolates, heart-shaped lollipops, all kinds of snacks and everything else. Somebody gave him like Cheetos.
What kind?
Little
Crunchy
pouches
or fluffy?
of crunchy asteroid Cheetos. I don't even know if that's a thing, but apparently, kids, they got everything. They're so lucky. But yeah, it's amazing. And he also got some cookies, some powdered red heart-shaped cookies to give away for some Heat players today. It's a challenge for me today to give out these credit cookies because I want to be kind of fair and give 5 players 2 cookies apiece. But I don't want to slight Tyler Herro, whose game might have stood out a little bit more than everybody else's. So I've got 2 cookies apiece to Tyler, Bam, Duncan, Haywood, and Jaime Jaquez for that putback dunk. But I don't know if I should give Tyler 3 and take away a cookie for somebody else, or if you're feeling magnanimous and feels like giving away an extra 11th cookie on the night there.
The way I felt here was 3 cookies for Bam, 3 cookies for Duncan, 3 cookies for Tyler, and 1 for Jaime just because of that putback dunk.
Okay.
That's kind of where I was going.
Haywood had a huge night though, so I will.
He did. That's true. 4 3-pointers. You're right. So let's go 3 for Bam, 3 for Tyler, 2 for Duncan, 1 each for Jaime and Haywood.
Okay, I can live with that. They were, again, those individual performances. We talked about Tyler and Bam working in conjunction. Tyler was aggressive as far as his scoring, but he also had a really nice night in terms of creating opportunities for others. 7 assists, also pulled down 7 rebounds, a near triple-double if you want to look at it from that perspective. But he was really engaged throughout the whole game. Even if that shot wasn't necessarily falling as consistently, I think he had a really polished, solid game. They didn't kind of take him away from his game. He was able to do what he wanted to, stick to his purpose, create his shots, and he was able to knock down pretty regularly. Yeah. Bam, just a consistent.
Well, let's stay on Tyler Herro. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it.
He took the point guard responsibilities with Terry Rozier out for the last 2 games, but especially tonight, very seriously. And I've always been a big Tyler Herro fan. I've been accused of being a Tyler Herro apologist. Yes. He's not always been the most serious player. He's not been Jordan Poole unserious.
No.
But he hasn't also been the most serious player all the time.
That's fair.
This was as serious of a basketball game as I've ever seen Tyler Herro play, I think. And maybe it's recency bias here, but certainly the most serious game I've seen him play in a long time. And I've lauded his improvements all year long, and I think the improvements are very real, whether or not I'm part of the Tyler Herro fan club or not. But tonight, 23 points, 7 assists, 7 rebounds. He's always been a good rebounder, but it's good that he's still doing that while also doing more things in other places.
Yeah.
That he didn't get bored of just running pick and roll. That could get boring. That can get boring for a basketball player, especially a player like Tyler Herro, who fashions himself this dynamic offensive player who can do many things. He could dribble his way into pull-up jumpers from the mid-range. And look, he took maybe an ill-advised long two-pointer late in the game, but you know what? There wasn't a whole lot happening on that possession, so I'm going to give him a pass on that. There's a little bit more time on the shot clock than I had wanted, but again, there was just not a lot happening on that offensive possession. The Heat needed a basket, so I'm giving him a pass. But other than that, I thought it was a totally clean game from him. He did not get bored of running pick and roll after pick and roll after pick and roll. And it sounds simple, but it's not, especially when you're a player like Tyler Herro who wants to do all these different things and wants to show off all these different facets of his game. But he's like, this is what the team needs from me, and I'm going to go ahead and do it. Late in the game also, the 76ers trapping him quite a bit on those final possessions, and he kept finding ways to pass out of those traps. He never got bogged down. The Heat never had to call a timeout. He never turned the ball over, more importantly than anything. And the offense just never got stuck in mud despite the traps. And that was something that Herro would run into problems with in the past. And it was not a problem tonight against Philadelphia. He hit those. He was able to find those outlets. He handled the traps well. It was just a very mature basketball game from Tyler Herro, and is one that I loved.
I think he was able to hold his own against Tyrese Maxey too. Like you look at the stat lines, Maxey pulled away. He scored 30 points, similar numbers in terms of he had 6 rebounds and 7 assists also. So a big game for Maxey, despite the fact that he was out for a little bit of a stretch in the third quarter. But I think, Herro did a really good job in that matchup. Took it, for every Maxey's a really good player. Like it's not to knock Tyrese Maxey at all, but I just think that, Tyler deserves his flowers as well because he had a really strong performance. I know that hasn't been the case all season long, and he did miss a couple. He missed some bad, I would say maybe even ill-advised 3-point shots that he took. But overall, though, it was still an aggressive game, and he was able to find that nice balance of looking for his shot, but also still making plays for others. And he plays in solid defense as well.
Yeah, it's such a good point. He could not have gotten dominated by Tyrese Maxey tonight, because if that happens, that puts Miami so behind the 8 ball in this matchup that it takes a lot of other guys to sort of make up for that. And he didn't. Maxey outscored him in all these things, and he had a better game than Tyler Herro did in a vacuum. But Tyler Herro didn't get dominated in that matchup, and he didn't get the Heat behind in that one-on-one matchup. So it's a great point by you. Can we talk about Bam Adebayo a little bit more?
Sure.
Because 23 points, 14 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals. His defense over this 48-hour stretch has been, put it on the defensive player of the year reel. It was a point that I wanted to make after the Milwaukee game, and I want to make it even more now. And I know there was no Joel Embiid, but his defense against Giannis last night, and then his defense overall tonight, he again, taking things seriously. Like he talked about this on the Bally Sports broadcast after the game, how Eric Spoelstra talked to the team. It's like, hey, don't look ahead to the All-Star break. We are almost there. We got 48 hours of basketball to play. Let's get 2 wins and then go into the All-Star break feeling good. And Bam Adebayo really took that on the chin. He was like, okay, I got it. As the team captain, I'm going to lead the effort. Whether or not he's scoring, whether or not he's playing great defense, whether or not he's rebounding or whatever it might be, the effort was there every minute he was on the court. And I think from an energy perspective, he led the Heat over these last 48 hours and over these back-to-back wins to go into the All-Star break. He is as big of a reason for these wins as anybody on the Miami Heat roster. And just a little notch on the feather in the cap there, the game-winning rebound at the game that got the Heat another possession and was able to drain the clock a little bit more, which took Philadelphia out of the game. So
have you checked the DPOY odds lately?
I'll do it right now.
I'm looking at them right now. No, I just looked at him right now. He's actually 3rd. He's behind Rudy Gobert, who seems like the odds.
And then Chet, right? Number 2.
Chet Holmgren the 2nd, but just behind him is Bam Adebayo. And considering what he did over the last couple of games, like I don't know how much national attention the Bucks game got, but considering what he did against Giannis, and as you pointed out, what he was able to accomplish tonight, and like it's just the season-long body of work. I still hope he gets his recognition there. And again, it's not to besmirch what Gobert does, because Gobert is a really good defender, but I just don't know if Bam is just getting the same kind of recognition. And it's such a good story in Minnesota because they're bouncing back. And Gobert he was unplayable at times last year, but he's found a really nice rhythm. He's contributing at a high level.
And Minnesota's number 1 in defensive rating. And you just sort of look at that and you're like, well, who's the best? Who's anchoring that? And it's Rudy Gobert. If I had a vote right now, I'd vote for Rudy Gobert just because of that. But the Heat have climbed to 8th in defensive rating, and they had been outside the top 10 for a very long time. And Bam Adebayo was a big reason for that. So he's starting to make his case. I'm glad FanDuel is recognizing. If FanDuel is recognizing it, then people are recognizing it because that's how Vegas works, right? That's how they base the odds off of. So I love that he's getting that recognition finally. All right, we're gonna move on past the credit cookies. Can the Heat keep this run going on the other side of the All-Star break? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Hungryroot. Listen, it's grocery shopping and meal planning for specific dietary needs or preferences can be challenging. It takes time consuming. It takes a lot of money. If this applies to you or someone why not try something different? And Hungryroot is the option for you. It saves time. It saves food waste, saves money, especially now with their special discount code. There's so much that you'll like about Hungryroot. You just take a simple, fun, short quiz, and Hungryroot gets to know what your personal health goals are, what you like to eat, the kitchen appliances you use, so much more. Whatever you're looking for, Hungryroot, has you covered, and they've got delicious recipe recommendations to put the groceries that you get to good use. Right now, Hungryroot is offering Locked On Heat listeners 40% off your first delivery and free veggies for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/lockedon and you get 40% off your first delivery and get your free veggies. That's hungryroot.com/lockedon. Don't forget to use our link so they know that we sent you.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. Thanks to everybody who sent in questions using that hashtag AskLOHeat on Twitter. Reach us via email, lockedonheat@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram, Locked On Heat. This question comes from Brian, who writes in, Miami heads into the All-Star break at 30-25. The Pacers and Magic are almost tied with them in record. I'm altering the question here because we just got the final result from the game in Toronto. The Pacers beating the Raptors, so they remain a half game up on the Heat for that 6th seed. Miami tied with the Magic at number 7. Going on with Brian's question, as bad as the 7-game losing streak was, is Miami still in a position to make a run at home court in the first round? Let's look at the standings a little bit more in detail. So Miami right now, 30-25 going into the All-Star break. The Pacers, having won that game in Toronto, they are 31-25, right? So they've played one more game. They're a half game up for that number 6 seed. The Magic are 30-25, tied in record with the Heat. The Heat have the tiebreaker right now, so they're 7, and the Orlando Magic are 8. We don't have to worry about Chicago or Atlanta. They're too far back, at least for our purposes right now. Philadelphia, who obviously we just beat tonight, they're in 5th place, 2.5 games up on the Heat. The Knicks are 3 games up on the Heat at number 4. So to get home court advantage in that first round, obviously you need one of those top 4 seeds. Boston, Cleveland, Milwaukee seem uncatchable, but the Knicks there at 3 games up, they've lost 4 in a row. They're dealing with a bunch of injuries to Julius Randle, OG Anunoby. They recently got Bojan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks at the trade deadline. But with those injuries, I don't know. I don't know when they were expected back. They obviously get the whole All-Star break, just like everybody else does, to maybe get healthy here. But I don't know. I think the Knicks are really good. The 76ers are going to be without Joel Embiid for a little while. Who knows what the Knicks injury situation is? We'll see about that. The Pacers just seem a little wobbly to me. They go on runs of wins, and then they go on runs of losses. So the number 4 seed in the East, I guess, is the question here. Because, again, I just think the top 3 seeds are too far gone at this point. What do you think? Do you think the number 4 seed is still a realistic goal for Miami?
I mean, just to piggyback on that, though, like Cleveland, they've only got 5 more wins. They've actually played 3 less games in Miami, I guess, by virtue of that trip to Paris that they took to. Their schedule just hasn't been able to accommodate it. So I wonder whether or not, they've won a lot of games of late. So they might just pull away and they might just be able to rebuild that. I talked about this on Locked On NBA, and I was curious, like, what's the I don't know if there's any statistical evidence of this, but like you're on a nice rhythm going to the All-Star break. Does the break hurt or not impact what happens after you come back? Are you able to replicate that nice rhythm like for Cleveland or for Miami, who was won 6 of 8, as we mentioned before? Are they going to be able to keep it going? I guess the larger question, though, is, to answer the question we received, I think it's certainly in play. I think top 4 is probably an option. Again, with Philadelphia dealing with no Embiid, with the Knicks injuries and everything else like that, I don't see why not. I don't even know that Milwaukee is a shoo-in. Like, I mean, they might continue to lose games too as they struggle. And now you get Bucks fans kind of ripping Dame Lillard, and I think they've kind of soured on him a little bit because he's having one of his quote unquote worst seasons as a professional. And it's just, I don't know. So I think they could certainly pass this. But then again, the 7-game losing streak isn't that far in their rear view mirror where it's not something that they might likely do again. That's just the nature of this Heat team. They could go. I would not be surprised if they won 7 straight or lost 7 straight at this point. I think they've turned a corner, but I think there's also the potential for them to, kind of when Jimmy comes back. And again, he'll be fully rested. And we've seen Jimmy come back fully rested and be like a really good version of himself. And I think, it's going to contribute. But then again, you marginalize somebody has to get taken out of that starting lineup. Is it Caleb? Is it Duncan?
Oh, it's Jovic. He's out.
Yeah. I mean,
Jovic is out. He's probably still in the rotation until Josh Richardson and Terry Rozier get back, but he's out of the starting lineup, I would think. And then at that point, look, I mean, they come back from the All-Star break. To your original point, like, how does a team sort of build off of momentum or bounce back on? I think it just depends on how talented the team is. Like a team like Cleveland, that's just flatly a good basketball team. I'm not worried about them coming out of the All-Star break. They've been playing their best basketball. They've got a ton of talent on that team. They're coalescing at the right time. They know how to play together. They're well coached. Like that team's going to be just fine. Other teams that are sort of in the middle of just a weirdly placed like win streak, like the Charlotte Hornets, for instance, have won 3 straight going into the All-Star break. I don't care, and I don't think that matters coming out of the All-Star break. Not just because they're out of the playoffs, but they could easily lose 3 straight coming out of the All-Star break because they're just not that good of a basketball team, right. And so, but for the Miami Heat's purposes, having won 6 of 8 going into this break, getting Jimmy Butler back on the other side of it, and then Terry Rozier and Josh Richardson at some point, hopefully within the next month, coming back, I think this team is playing their best basketball of the season. And I would expect that to continue coming out of the break. But the schedule, it's a little wonky coming out of the break. 4 straight road games to start their schedule coming out of All-Star. In New Orleans on Friday, February 23rd, after this week off, basically. In New Orleans, in Sacramento, in Portland, and then in Denver. And then that Portland game, the easiest team on their schedule, that's on the second night of a back-to-back after that Sacramento Kings game. And the way that the Kings play, fast-paced, physical, that Portland game is going to be tough, man. Like that, they're going to be beat up going into Portland for that game. And then they get a couple of home games against Utah and Detroit where they could potentially bounce back. But it's a rough schedule coming out. So we'll see. But if you're getting a refreshed Jimmy Butler, that's real good news. And that's sort of, if there's a counter to that rough schedule, it's a refreshed and ready to go Jimmy Butler scoring 30 points a night. Like that's the way to sort of get over the hump. But I do think if I'm the Heat, sure, Boston, Cleveland, Milwaukee, there's a chance that they fall. I'm not counting on it. I think you set realistic goals for yourselves. And I'm aiming at New York. We're 3 games back. Let's go for it. New York's got injuries. Philadelphia's got injuries. I don't trust the Pacers. Let's climb the standings. Let's go on a run here and make a run for that 4th seed. I think that is a realistic and an attainable goal for Miami. And if you shoot for the stars and you land on the moon, it's not a big deal because the ultimate goal should be just escaping the play-in tournament altogether. And we were 1 4th quarter away from going into the All-Star break, sort of positioned outside that play-in tournament. So that's what that is. Let's get to Jeff's question here. Oh,
well, no, that 4-game stretch there when they come back, I didn't realize that's a really challenging one. They've got to win at least 2, if not go 3-1 in that 4-game for them to be able to keep pace too. Because otherwise, I mean, that's just too.
You can't fall much too much of a challenge than where you're at.
No, yeah.
Jeff writes in, seems like point guard isn't a big problem for us. Should the Heat sign Danilo Gallinari? Would it benefit us? I like this question because Tyler Herro, like we talked about at the top of the show here, taking those point guard duties seriously with Terry Rozier out. I still think that there's a need for another ball handler, even as well as Tyler Herro's played, and Duncan Robinson running pick and roll with Bam over the last couple of nights too. Like that's been a big thing. Him stepping into the starting lineup in place of Terry Rozier, he's been huge. But the fact that you don't have a real guard behind them, I know Alondes Williams has been brought up on that two-way contract. He's a two-way guy for a reason. I think they should investigate the guard market still during the All-Star break just to add another body. I do think that this team probably needs to add another body. Yeah. But look, if you think that if you're the Heat and you think that Danilo Gallinari can really help you, I wouldn't be opposed to that either. I think Tyler and Duncan have played well enough that they've made that a little bit more of an option. But if it were me, I would still sort of hedge towards getting another ball handler, just considering who the injuries are, who's hurt, and the fact that we're one injury away from just being at a severe deficit of ball handlers.
Yeah, I mean, you do have center options in Orlando and Thomas Bryant who just aren't able to crack the rotation. You go to Kevin Love more often than not. I don't know. I also think about what we've seen from Miami in the offense over the last couple of nights and what we've seen over this recent stretch. And, anybody who can stretch the floor with as much consistency as Gallo can, I think is a worthy option that Miami should explore. I just also don't know. Last year they were so undersized, even more so than they are now. And that's why the Kevin Love addition was such a perfect fit, because there was a glaring position of need. Were starting Caleb or Max or somebody was, undersized at that 4 spot, and they needed somebody, and him being bought out, a veteran that stretches the floor, etc. It was such a good fit, and he's had a resurgence this year, but he provided a boost last year. But I mean, people kind of overlook conveniently that when he first came on there, they lost a bunch of games. Like, he brought great vibes, and those vibes manifested in the postseason. But during the regular season, the good vibrations did not equate to actual wins.
Right.
I don't know that any player that Miami's going to get on the buyout market is liable to be a contributor, not to the same degree as Kevin Love was. So I don't know. It's just,
I'm with you. No, I think you're right. I think you're right on that. And that's why I sort of lean more towards just get depth, break glass in case of emergency type guys.
I can't see why you wouldn't bring in Bouye though. Like, he's your system guy.
Whoever it is.
Yeah.
Just somebody, just a guard. That's what I'm saying. Just a guard, somebody who can dribble the ball up and down the court. I like Danilo Gallinari just fine. You mentioned Gallinari's had a little bit of a resurgence this year. It's a great point. He's been pretty good, but like, who's he playing over? Right. And I don't know that you necessarily need depth at that position, especially when you're healthy. Haywood Highsmith is basically out of the rotation. He's sort of your depth at the 4 spot. I would just go get an emergency guard that this team has basically needed since they lost Drew Smith for the season. But we'll see. That'll do it for us today. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube and follow us on your podcast app.